Have you ever stopped to think about what getting sick really means? For more than a century, how we answer that question has been shaped by two major and pretty different frameworks. In this explainer, we're going to take a neutral look at these two historical models, germ theory and terrain theory.
See, it all really boils down to one fundamental question. What is the primary cause of disease? Is it some sort of external invader coming from the outside, or is it more of an internal imbalance happening on the inside? The way these two theories answer that question has shaped medicine in profoundly different ways.
So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start by introducing the two frameworks, then we'll dive into the germ theory model, followed by the terrain theory model. After that, we'll compare them side by side and wrap it all up with a final thought.
All right, so these two ways of thinking didn't just appear out of nowhere. They actually emerged from a really intense scientific debate back in the 19th century. And their competing ideas have offered very distinct explanations for why we get sick, influencing everything ever since.
At the center of this debate were two French scientists. Now, Louis Pasteur, that's a name most of us probably recognize, but his contemporary, Antoine Béchamp, was also a highly regarded scientist, even though he's not as well known today. Their different perspectives really laid the groundwork for this whole discussion.
Okay, let's kick things off with the first model. This one is often described as an outside-in perspective because it really focuses on external factors as the main cause of illness. So, the basic idea behind germ theory is this. It proposes that many diseases are caused by specific microorganisms, what we call germs or pathogens. Think of it like an external bug, say a particular bacteria, invading a host, like a person, and its presence is what directly causes a specific illness.
And this theory didn't just show up overnight. It developed through some key moments. Back in the 1850s, Louis Pasteur's work showed that microorganisms were behind things like fermentation. By the 1870s, his experiments helped challenge the old idea of spontaneous generation. Then, in 1884, a scientist named Robert Koch created a systematic method for linking a specific microbe to a specific disease, and that really kicked off the golden era of bacteriology.
Koch's postulates gave science a clear four-step framework. First, you have to find the microorganism in every sick individual, but not in healthy ones. Second, you have to isolate that microbe and grow it by itself in a lab culture. Third, if you introduce that cultured microbe to a new healthy host, it should cause the same disease. And finally, step 4, you have to be able to re-isolate that exact same microbe from the new host. It was a very structured way to identify pathogenic agents.
All right, now let's switch gears and look at the second model, terrain theory. And as you might guess, this one offers more of an inside-out perspective on what causes illness. Terrain theory proposes something quite different. It suggests that the main factor in disease isn't the germ itself, but the body's internal environment, what it calls the terrain. From this viewpoint, illness happens when that internal terrain gets weak or out of balance, which then allows disease to develop.
This whole idea is summed up perfectly in a quote often attributed to the famous French physiologist Claude Bernard. The microbe is nothing, the terrain is everything. That statement really gets to the heart of the theory, that the condition of the host body is what matters most.
So this framework rests on a few core ideas. It suggests our internal state, things like our nutrition or pH levels, is what determines how susceptible we are to getting sick. A key concept here is plemorphism, which is the idea that microorganisms aren't fixed things. They can actually change their form and function based on the health of their host. So in this view, germs are more of a symptom of a sick terrain, not the original cause. One of its biggest proponents, Antoine Béchamp, even theorized about something called microzymas, foundational life particles that could shift and change depending on the body's health.
So now that we've outlined both frameworks, let's put them right next to each other and see where their core assumptions really differ.
And when you see them side by side, the contrast is pretty clear. Germ theory points to external pathogens as the cause of disease, so naturally, the focus for prevention is on killing or avoiding those germs. But terrain theory points to a weakened internal environment, so for prevention, the focus shifts to strengthening the body's own terrain. The role of the microbe completely changes, from being the primary cause to being a symptom of an existing imbalance.
You know, another way to think about it is this. Are germs aggressors or are they scavengers? The germ theory model really frames microbes as external attackers that we have to defend ourselves against. The terrain theory model, on the other hand, sees them more as internal opportunists, like scavengers that only show up to thrive when tissue is already weakened or unhealthy.
So we've explored two very different ways of making sense of illness. Let's try to bring this all together.
Now, the goal here today was simply to describe these two historical and conceptual frameworks in a neutral way. We're not trying to endorse one or dismiss the other, but just to present their core ideas and how they differ based on how they've been historically understood.
And that really leaves us with a final question to reflect on. How do these different frameworks, one focusing on the external germ, the other on the internal terrain, continue to shape our modern approaches to health, wellness, and medicine today? It's a question that invites all of us to think a little more deeply about the foundations of what we believe about health.